Hello everyone, my name's Josh Berle. I'm with Mastercard and I chair Project Inclusion at the Payments Association. I'm very privileged to be joined today by Jayne Sibley, the founder of card program Sibstar. So Jayne, please introduce yourself before we then have a chat about the cost of living crisis and payments.
Okay, thank you. I'm Jayne Sibley. I'm one of the co-founders at Sibstar, which is a new debit card and app for people living with dementia.
Super. Could you just talk a little bit more about your business in actual fact, where it's come from, where it's going to, before we do a bit of a dive down into cost of living?
Yeah, sure. So the idea for Sibstar came from my own lived experience of caring for my mum and dad, both of whom have dementia. And it was really through my mum's particular experience of really mismanaging her money and no longer understanding money that made her financially vulnerable. So she was giving money away, she was taking money out of the cash point, losing it, overspending on food or cleaning products, and the money that she and dad had worked hard for all their life was disappearing in ways that it wouldn't have had she not had a dementia. So we decided that there had to be a better way. There must be more families like mine out there struggling with this particular challenge, and we needed to solve it. We tried lots of different solutions and nothing really worked. And that's when we came up with the idea of a debit card for the person living with dementia that is loaded with your chosen amount of money, and then an app that sits on your son, daughter, husband, wife phone. And within that app, you can set spending limits, set if the card can be used at the cash point, online. You get notifications to your phone about when the card is being used. So it's a gentle way of keeping an eye on the person that you love and are caring for, and enabling them to be financially included in the world, which is really important for people living with dementia.
Thank you. And it's worth me just declaring an interest here, which is that obviously we're very proud that it's going to be, it is a Mastercard debit card. But perhaps you can just mention as well some of the other sort of formal associations you've got with key stakeholders within the the medical world of dementia and Alzheimer's and that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The first time we wrote this idea down on a piece of paper was to apply for the Alzheimer's Society Accelerator Programme. That was a couple of years ago. And when they said, yes, Jayne, we think this is a great idea, we're going to back you and support you, it was a bit of a game-changing moment. So we're really proud that both Alzheimer's Society and Mastercard are our partners. Our card is co-branded with Alzheimer's Society, Mastercard, obviously, and having these two partners on board has definitely propelled our business and allowed us to design, build, pilot, and now launch Sibstar. So we're really grateful.
Super. Okay, so let's turn now to cost of living and the cost of living crisis. So as people will know, the Payments Association through Project Inclusion has been focusing in on this as it impacts the payments industry, just to get a variety of different perspectives and voices on this. Jayne, when we talk about the cost of living crisis, what does it mean for you? I suppose from the angle of being a card program administrator, what does it mean? How do you see it affecting you as well? And in a way, what do you think you can best do about it, if anything?
Yeah. Well, I hope we can help people living with dementia who are struggling with the cost of living crisis. For people living with dementia, this has really impacted them as money becomes tighter. People living with dementia are cutting down on things like their social activities. They are staying at home a little bit more, which does impact their condition. Because as from my own experience with mum and dad, being able to keep out and about and doing the things you've always done, retaining those familiar routines and social connections are vital to the cognitive well-being of people living with dementia. Isolation is probably one of the it has a very detrimental effect on people living with dementia. So it's really important that we enable people living with dementia to continue going about their everyday life. Obviously that becomes a bit more challenging with the cost of living crisis, but I hope we can enable that in some way.
I mean, it's interesting. Are there, from speaking with, say, the Alzheimer's Society, are there any specific things that the cost of living crisis over the past sort of 6 months to 9 months has has impacted on the community you're seeking to serve that perhaps wouldn't be reflected elsewhere? I mean, if there aren't any in particular, that's fine, but it would be just useful to understand whether that is the case or not.
Yeah, definitely. So the Alzheimer's Society did some research just before Christmas, really, and they found that 1 in 7 people living with dementia are cutting down on their social activities. They are becoming sort of more stranded in their own homes, which obviously has a negative effect. And in some cases, people are starting to sort of live in one room to cut down on fuel bills and things like that. So it's having a direct impact on this particular group of people.
Gosh, okay. And could you maybe just provide a bit of detail in terms of how your card would actually enable people to, well, both basically control that? We know, as you've explained, that's a general proposition that you offer, but
Yeah.
particularly in a situation where money might be actually more constrained than it was previously because of the cost of living crisis.
Yeah, so I suppose that the need to protect people financially has always been really important, and it is never more important now than protecting the finances and the savings of those people who are living with dementia. You know, the cost of care is going up, whether that be in home care or residential care. So the need to safeguard and protect the savings of those people is vital, because they will need those savings later on to pay for those high levels of care which are increasing. So I must say up front, you know, we do charge for our service. It is a £4.99 setup fee and £4.99 a month subscription fee. But what we researched that price point really carefully with our audience, and they did say that this was a reasonable price. It was value for money, and they likened it to paying their mobile phone bill, their TV license. It buys them peace of mind. It buys them security. It buys them that money management functionality, and £4.99 a month is a lot less than they may lose to you know, a fraudster over the phone or overbuying on cleaning products like my mum would. So at around £60 a year, that's, in the context of what could be lost, it's pay a little now to protect more.
But that's really interesting. Thank you. And I mean, we haven't touched on this thus far. But where does the money come from for many of your card users? You know, in other words, what level of income do they enjoy? Where I'm heading with this one, because we touched on this before as part of our cost of living crisis program, is the extent to which benefits, welfare disbursements, could be improved in the way they're targeted and distributed, and how that impacts on your customer base. And I'm particularly interested, Jayne, to understand whether you foresee, or indeed already there is, any facility with your card that intersects with, say, welfare benefits and maybe pension payments, private pension payments, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So at the moment, people pay privately for our product. You know, it's the individual themselves that pay, or their supporter that pays. We don't currently partner with any local authorities that are footing that bill for them. I think, sort of connected to your point, is the fact that people really value the fact that their pension doesn't sit on our card, their income doesn't come into their card, that still sits on their normal high street bank account. Actually, all of that money is protected. So really what they just have on their Sibstar card is their spending money. So you can only ever lose the amount of money that's sat on that card. So £50 on it, you might lose £50, but you wouldn't lose your entire pension for that month. So I think it's about protecting their people's income, and getting the balance between protecting that income and enabling them to sort of go out and about and enjoy, you know, their social life and their you know, activities.
What's your impression of how well the payments sector is seeking to address cost of living, and equally whether there are other actors like government, for example, or public sector more widely, that obviously have a very important role to play, whether there is more that they could do as well?
Yeah. I always find these questions quite challenging, because I don't come from a payments background or banking background, finance background, government or anything. You know, this was
Jayne, your payments royalty now, I'm afraid.
I feel quite not qualified to answer the question, really. My own experience of working as a non-payments person, having never worked in payments before, having sort of entered this world, I have found it incredibly supportive and incredibly supportive of what we're doing. And there's a real appetite and a real interest in us, the product that we are developing or have developed and launched to serve this niche audience. People can sort of see that it's needed, that it's unfortunately a growing market. This is a global issue of the rates of dementia are increasing phenomenally, unfortunately. And so I think the payment sector see real value in what we're doing. I think because we're small and nimble, and maybe we don't come from payments, we've sort of gone into this with a healthy level of naivety and have just given it a try to see what happens. And fortunately, it's gone very well. And I think that is respected amongst I hope it's respected amongst the payment sector, and people are intrigued and want to support us and see us grow. I think products that serve these niche audiences are really valuable. I think we bring such a deep understanding of what it's like to live this experience. It's almost that is what makes us unique in some ways, and that has enabled us to develop a product and now talk to our customers in a very helpful and very empathetic way, which I think customers appreciate. So I guess we are fairly unique in that way, and I think that serves us well.
So, I mean, one of the interesting things about the Sibstar card program is the provision at the demand of families and friends of people suffering from dementia that they have a role to play. Many of those, I assume, will be people with lasting power of attorney over financial and probably medical affairs for the donor themselves. To what extent has the current cost of living crisis, though, affected, in your experience, that wider community? So one can appreciate that someone who's suffering from dementia, they're already a risk to themselves to an extent with how they spend. Things are more expensive, that's a problem. Has there been a bearing on the wider community that would support those individuals, both before and once they use a card product like Sibstar?
Yeah, no, absolutely. When we started developing Sibstar, and we always knew that the benefit was not just for the person living with dementia, it was for their family carers as well. So, for example, when my dad was particularly ill, I gave up work to care for him, which affected my own financial status, my own emotional and mental well-being. So enabling the carers, the family carers, to remain in work and socially connected is really important. So if the person living with dementia is able to live independently for longer, you delay those caring responsibilities, which allows the carers to stay in work and go about their everyday life. And in the light of the cost of living crisis, their ability to do that and earn their own, maintain their own financial status is even more important. So there is a ripple effect. And actually, even beyond that, I hope that by keeping people living with dementia active in their communities, and valuable members of their communities, we start to break down some of those stigmas around dementia, improve understanding and sort of acceptance of the condition, which is still shrouded in a fear from many. So yeah, the ripple effect is really important.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've mentioned it before. My own mother has dementia. She's, I think, beyond being in a position where she could live independently and therefore would use your sort of card product. Although I think you've always said that it's for a phase of life, isn't it? For maintaining people's independence. But I was going to make the point that because families are so affected by this, actually you kind of have to embrace it and understand it as actually maybe another normal part of human development, not a particularly pleasant one initially, but maybe one you can rationalize to an extent.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there is how do I put this? It is part of life, and it's very and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It is really difficult. It's really difficult. There's no two ways about it. Having a parent or any family member living with dementia is probably a huge challenge. but I also want to see the positives in how you can impact, how your family life can be impacted positively. You know,
Mm.
with my own mum and dad, I've had some of those precious moments with them at their most poorly, really, and those are the things to remember, and those are the things to sort of cherish and hold on to amongst all of the difficult times. There are certainly
Yeah.
moments, wow, gosh, this was a really precious moment, and I more and more of those, please.
Yeah, and I similarly share those moments when I just see those chinks of light that she's still there. You're still there. You haven't gone completely, and it's amazing when you see it. I mean,
Yeah.
this is really interesting and I hadn't thought of this before I was preparing my thoughts for this chat, which was the extent to which actually, Sibstar is possibly as much about the family as it is about the subject. Isn't it? And cost of living crisis means that everyone's under more pressure. I think the point you made about how people can stay in work, or perhaps have a higher chance of being able to stay in work because they protect the income of those individuals, is maybe an underplayed point, and maybe one. I mean, maybe you have been emphasizing it, but from my perspective, I think it's really good that you've isolated that point here.
Yeah, no, it's really important. When you have a family member, and in my experience, parent living with dementia, you want to have you want to have the mum and dad for as long as possible. You want life to sort of remain as it is for as long as possible. You want mum to be mum,
Yeah.
for however long she can be. And I think by enabling people to live independently with dementia, you prolong the time that person can be them.
Yeah.
Of course, all take on caring responsibilities and absolutely when we need to, but all the time you can maintain your existing relationship with them and have my mum as she was, then that's precious. And by enabling independence, we hope that time might be extended, even if just by a little bit. It's
Yeah. No, I
valuable.
mean, that's very, very powerful, I think, to have that as in a way part of what you're trying to do. Let's just talk a little bit about the future. So, I suppose we're living now in an environment where there's higher inflation, and costs are higher than they were, although inflation might level out at some point later this year. So we're led to believe. Um, where do you see Sibstar being on, and maybe products that are like this in the payment sector being in the course of the next 5 years, trying to provide you know a service that offers greater control over finances, whilst you have this environment of maybe greater volatility in the high street as well? Can you maybe just get out your crystal ball and sort of have a think about where we would be in 5 years' time?
Mm. Well, I hope Sibstar and products like ours can be a stabilizing force. There's an opportunity to sort of, I hope, maintain things as they are for the small cost of products like ours. I hope that we can protect people's finances so that we take some of that worry and stress away. And that those finances are safeguarded for what might be needed later on. The cost of care is going up. The majority of people living with dementia pay for that care themselves, unlike other conditions which are treated by the NHS. That this group are certainly footing the bill themselves. And if not, that bill falls to government to pay for. So I think that, as I said earlier, paying a little now to protect more for the future is, I hope, something that will play out over the next few years and be able to ride this volatile wave that we are going through.
Well, Jayne Sibley of Sibstar, I think that would be a good place to wind up our conversation. And can I just say thank you ever so much. The best of luck. I think it's a wonderful program. Mastercard are very proud to be part of it, and thank you for contributing to the Payments Association series of interviews on the cost of living crisis. So thank you very much, and thank you as well from me, Josh Berle, for watching.
Thank you.